So I can narrow that down because of Psychotog.
There you go. I got some updates from our other GP that's going on this weekend. It is in Hong Kong. Seal deck for Theros. And 16th ranked player on our top 25, Martin Yuza, he's 8-1 into day 2. 9th ranked player, Stanislav Sivka, he's also 8-1 and into day 2. Shuhei Nakamura, currently ranked 7th on the top 25 Magic Pro rankings. He's 8-1 as well. So doing work down there. Also, the 5th ranked player, Yuya Watanabe, he's sitting at 7-1-1, also safely into day 2. Tsuchin Kuo, out, which is rarity for him. I mean,
he's
especially
great on day one.
He is, and especially in the Asian area GPs where he doesn't have to travel through, across 3/4 of the globe to play a Magic tournament. He crushes those, and also the number 23rd ranked player Li Shi-tian, he's out as well. He's been on a great run over the last year and a half, but he wasn't able to day 2 that event.
And he's from Hong Kong, so it's his local GP. He was looking to defend his home turf.
He's got to be
It's
bummed.
a shame that it didn't work out that way for him.
Yeah.
Yuya Watanabe at 7-1-1. Most people with at X11 going to day 2 of a GP are like, oh well, they have an outside shot, but Yuya 7-1-1, you're like, oh man, he's basically already in top 8.
He's a lock.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yuya is one of those unique players who...
He is unique.
Jeez. He has the ability to seemingly top 8 Magic tournaments whenever he wants, regardless of the size. He's an unbelievable player.
Unstoppable force on the circuit.
And that's why he's ranked number 5 in the world. I mean... there
have been many moments in the last 5 years where if that list had existed, he would have been number 1.
Oh, absolutely. All right, so players are lining up their openers here. Let's see if Lucas has a keeper.
Looks like Lucas' hand is really strong. He's got those legs pumping.
I was going to say, I can't actually see his hand. How do you know that? You got a physical tell here, the big read. All right, Carlos looks like he's deciding whether he'd like to keep as well. No, it actually was
no good.
It was Lucas who was deciding, and he has decided against keeping. He's going to mulligan down to 6. Carlos Romao has kept.
Yeah, Lucas is probably pretty frustrated here. This is definitely the match he wanted to play this weekend. And here he is mulliganing again for the 2nd game in a row. Last game, his mulligan really cost him. And I mean, it's going to be rough for him to mulligan in these matchups because he needs to have spells in the early turns to force his opponent to tap mana. But then, he needs to also have enough land to be able to cast those mid-game planeswalkers that are supposed to take this match home for him. He gets access to Chandra, Pyromaster, which is so good in a matchup like this because it not only gets him extra cards, but also pressures his opponent's planeswalkers in a very unique kind of way.
And frankly, I just want to see this deck go. The red deck?
Yeah.
I just want to see it go. I haven't seen it much. All right, he's got a keeper. Does Carlos Romao have the turn 1 Thoughtseize? No, he doesn't. He's got a tap land, and he just has go. I think we're missing... Well, we've hit our land drop, but unfortunately he's got Ash Zealot and Frostburn Weird in hand, and this is not... It's nice that Nick throws taps for colorless. That is something that is... very convenient, yes, in a card that already does really powerful things. But, yeah, not when you're... It does kind of work against itself in those devotion decks in that way. It's a clever little... Ooh, you see Lucas kind of rub the table with that thing like Mountain one time, and he hit there, and it looks like we're going to see a Chandra's Phoenix here. And enter the red zone and begin applying pressure as Carlos Romao is going to drop down to 18. Phoenix can be a recurring threat.
Yeah, it's a very good card against these Esper decks. I mean, it gets in there for 2 damage right away. Now, if he does play another Phoenix here, he opens himself up to get Detention Sphered, and that would be an absolute disaster for him. But it looks like he's going to be able to resolve a Perforos from the looks of things. And
Now,
that
what
would
is-
just be great for him.
What is Perforos going to do to the board state?
Well, Perforos is going to, basically it's like a hammer in the sense that.
Oh, I guess, is he missing a land drop here?
Oh, I thought he drew the land. That's
I guess.
interesting.
Is that a last breath?
It is. Now that Chandra's Phoenix is going to become exiled.
Interesting. I was talking with Zach about last breath on the podcast, actually. We're talking about limited. And I said, well, what's the deal with last breath? And he said, it was put in the set to beat Voice of Resurgence. So that's what that was for. But it does work against other things like Chandra's Phoenix here as well.
Yeah, Chandra's Phoenix is a powerful, recurable, 2-power guy.
It sure was.
Definitely the definitely the card that you want against that when you're fighting, with a white deck, especially a white control strategy where you're not really concerned with your opponent's life total at all.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the last turn, we noticed that Lucas had access to cast Perforos, God of the Forge. And had he done so, he would have increased the value of all of his spells that come after that by a significant margin, especially considering the fact that he had, just more creatures in hand, because it's essentially like a haste engine when you have the Perforos.
All right, well, he's going to get to fire one off here. It could get annulled, but it doesn't. So here's Perforos, and now it's on the table. Perhaps a turn late, Jake?
Yeah, I think that might be a turn late, because if he had cast it the last turn, then he would have been able to just, cast a whole bunch of creatures that turn. And yeah, Carlos would have been able to use a removal spell to deal with one of them, but he would have taken 2 damage from each of those creatures that came down, and really been forced to just use all of his spells to interact with everything that Sputnik had going on. Here it looks like Carlos now has access to a detention sphere, so that can come down and deal with Perforos, God of the Forge, pretty nicely too.
He also has access to Jace, Architect of Thought, for a follow-up play, but for now, let's get Perforos off the table.
Yeah, Perforos is really good at pressuring Planeswalkers and getting them off the table quite quickly, so you're going to want to lead with that detention sphere whenever it's possible.
All right, there's a Frostburn Weird, not that exciting, and another one, and that's it. And all of a sudden, this is looking kind of miserable here for Lucas. I mean, he does have pressure, but you just got to figure that Carlos has something to do here. Well, it's an Ashiok, so not exactly amazing in this spot.
Definitely not.
I mean Lucas can
pretty good.
What did he hit?
He hit 2
BTEs,
2 Burning Tree Emissaries, and a Perforos, God of the Forge.
Okay, not bad, but it is going to be under pressure. Ashiok is here, and potentially could be dead. I mean, what can Carlos have? Something like a Doomblade to kind of gum up the works here? There's a Doomblade to take out one of the Frostburn Weirds. So this is going to allow Lucas to bring Ashiok down to 1 loyalty.
Yeah, that's definitely what he's going to want to do here. I mean, that Ashiok being at 1 loyalty is a massive difference from it being at 2.
Yes.
If it's at 2, then he can use it to put a Burning Tree Emissary into play, and then he can do something like cast an Elspeth with mana open, or cast an Aetherling with mana open.
I see.
With that Burning Tree Emissary mana.
All right, and here's Jace, Architect of Thought. So is he just going to plus Jace here? Or is he going to put Lucas to the test and say, look, I'm going to minus Jace, get some value, and make you decide which one of these Planeswalkers you want to try to kill?
I like minusing Jace here.
That's what he's going to do. This is interesting.
Puts your opponent in an interesting place.
Hey, look, another Jace. There's also another Ashiok in that pile, conveniently, and a Hero's Downfall. So 3 just great spells off the top here, and I think that it didn't really matter there for Carlos. The one with 2 cards was going to be the one that got picked.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that he didn't leave both Planeswalkers in the same pile and put the Hero's Downfall in a different pile.
Because they're redundant.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, it's pretty rough for him anyway.
Yes.
But
all right, so there's another Frostburn Weird in hand here for Lucas Pastorini. He also has, interestingly, an Ember Swallower. Now, can he do anything broken this turn? He does have Nykthos going, or is that stuff going to have to wait till next turn? Because, man, if he could pay the Monstrosity for his Ember Swallower here, I mean,
it would be huge.
It would be massive. Can he?
He cannot.
Okay.
At most right now, he has access to 7 mana because he can only net 1 extra mana off that Nykthos, because if he plays the 4-drop that's in his hand, then it only brings
Ember
him up
Swallower?
to 4 devotion. Yeah.
Okay.
And that Nykthos, you have to think about it in terms of you break even with 3 devotion, and each devotion you have above that, you're netting 1 mana.
Okay. All right, so Carlos Romao says, yeah, Jace, you've done your work here. Ashiok's in the bin, and this time Lucas says, all right, 2 lands, or you can have a Sphinx's Revelation. And Carlos goes, yeah, well, 2's bigger than 1, I'll take it.
Yeah, I'm sure Carlos is very happy to pick up those extra lands here.
Plays the Temple of Deceit, scry 1, keeps the card on top. Now he's going to play Supreme Verdict to wipe the board, and we're going to see Ember Swallower here. But is it going to survive long enough to actually do anything? I think he drew a Perforos.
And I'm actually surprised these Perforos remain in his deck. It's really hard to get the devotion count against your opponent here.
It was Perforos, and he did play it. He did not play the Ember Swallower here.
I don't hate that. I mean, you think your opponent's probably going to untap and play a Planeswalker. I mean, you basically play your whole hand at any point now when you draw your cards. So you really just... A Perforos is going to be really good at pressuring Planeswalkers. If Carlos doesn't have another Detention Sphere in hand, that it does represent a lot of pseudo haste damage because of the Pandemonium effect attached to Perforos.
Can you explain what a Pandemonium effect is?
When a creature enters the battlefield, when you control Perforos, God of the Forge, your creature will deal 2 damage to your opponent. Or your Perforos will deal 2 damage to your opponent.
And there's a card called Pandemonium that does that?
There's a card called Pandemonium that when a creature comes into play under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to your opponent.
I see.
Yes.
All right. So another land here, and I mean, the other consideration with the Ember Hauler or the Ember Swallower, of course, though, is, if he were able to untap here and activate it, that's when things start to get ugly. All right, so here it is. Ember Swallower, trigger from Perforos. Very likely to redirect to Ashiok here.
I would assume as much.
Carlos Romao sitting at 16 life. He's not under any immediate threat of death.
I'm actually surprised a lot of these cards stayed in the matchup here. Because I think Chandra and Hammer are really the best cards in Burning Earth post-board. And, he still has a lot of 4-drops in his deck, and none of them are Burning Earths or Chandras, so not really sure what he was cutting and putting in here.
He does have Burning Earths in the board, though?
He does.
Because that seems amazing right now. I was thinking about that. You mentioned it earlier in the day, Jake, and, I mean, look at Carlos Romao's mana base.
Yeah. He is soft to a Burning Earth.
Burning Earth would just be nuts here.
So he does have the Chandras in his deck.
All right. We saw the Ember Swallower get Heroes downfalled. And now all of a sudden we're to the point where Sphinx's Revelation starts to come into picture here, right? I mean...
Oh, yeah. I mean, here, I think one of my favorite lines of play that Carlos can make is he can -2 his Ashiok, put Burning Tree Emissary into play, and then use the mana from the Burning Tree Emissary to actually give a huge boost to his Sphinx's Revelation. So he could have just main phased Revelation for 6 here.
Yeah, but I think he's already used Ashiok this turn, though.
Oh, well, I meant next turn. Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, next turn? All right.
Yeah, next turn he can, without playing a land, he'll still be able to Revelation for a huge amount. He's going to be playing other lands, so...
He's trying to decide if he wants a Detention Sphere Perforos here, or if he really cares. I mean, is Perforos doing much at this point?
I think at this point he kind of just has an embarrassment of riches, and he's going to be discarding on his end step in the next turn anyway. I would probably just play the Detention Sphere. Your opponent has 1 card in their hand. You're at 16 life.
And you're looking to fire off a Sphinx's Revelation next turn anyway?
Yeah, you're just looking to spend as many of the cards in your hand as you can, spend as many as you can, because you're going to untap in a Revelation.
Yeah, and of course, the problem being that Lucas Pastorini knew that was going to happen.
Yes.
And conceded when he drew his land for the turn and just had absolutely no pressure. So, I got to say, Carlos Romao kind of put a beating on Lucas there. I mean, that was
very
that wasn't
handily won the
particularly
match.
close game of
Lucas
Magic.
had some pretty rough draws there. You know,
He did.
In game 1, he was unable to hit his third land drop for a very long time. He was facing down, I think, an Elspeth Suns champion on the turn after he hit his third land drop finally. And then in the second game, you know, he didn't have double red on turn 2, and then he went from finding himself without the right lands to cast his spells in a strong sequencing to just getting flooded out and not drawing any non-lands after, you know, his second turn or so.
Right.
So in the one turn where he wanted to draw a land, he was unable to do so, and in every following turn, he drew a land.
Yeah.
It's pretty rough for him.
That's a rough one. Yeah, it's going to be tough to come back from when you're sitting in Lucas Pastorini's seat. You can see him considering his unsideboard plans. Let's take a look at our other feature match here. This is Chris Fennell. And Chris is playing against Lauren Nolan.
And it's looking like Chris has
Yeah,
a Gruul Devotion strategy. This is my pick for the breakout deck of this tournament. I think this deck will win this Grand Prix.
okay. Well, walk us through what's going on here.
All right, so Chris has a Domri in play. It looks like he just activated the plus ability on Domri, putting an Elvish Mystic into his hand. Now he has access to 4 mana. He could use that 4 mana to cast the Xenagos, which is going to put a creature into play, which the creatures from Xenagos will effectively keep that Desecration Demon at bay indefinitely. And even if your opponent has a removal spell for one of your creatures, you're still going to have something to sacrifice to the Desecration Demon to keep it at bay. Now, something that's really nice is that he is going to get a Nylea, God of the Hunt, which can eventually fight with the demon once he's able to untap and put some mana into it, but he still doesn't have a Nykthos yet. Once he draws the Nykthos, this draw can do some really, really... Oh, he does have the Nykthos.
He has a Nykthos, yeah.
So, yeah, he can... I think you just cast Xenagos here, and then the next turn you can start doing really, really scary things.
Okay. See, he's got a Mizzium Mortars in his hand there as well.
And this is a little bit awkward because he can, in fact, cast Elvish Mystic and Nylea on the same turn here by casting the Elvish Mystic and then activating the Nykthos, but he cannot cast the Elvish Mystic and then cast the Xenagos because he would have to use the Temple of Abandon in order to activate. So what he's going to want to do here is he's going to want to... I'm actually surprised by that. He chooses to... put his elf into play as opposed to making a token. Because
So is he just going to sack the elf to the Desecration Demon or something?
That's what it looks like to me.
Okay. But the elf actually represents a couple of mana on the battlefield with a Nykthos, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so maybe just running a Satyr out there and saying...
Yeah, I like just running the Satyr out there.
Yeah.
It also gets more value out of your Xenagos.
Right.
You know, you're going to get to tap down that Desecration Demon, and you're going to need to sacrifice something to Desecration Demon regardless, because you do have 2 Planeswalkers in play. You don't just want to give your opponent the pick of the litter with their 6/6 flyer.
Right. Yeah, this is an interesting one, as we can see a pretty quick start here. Now, this deck is capable of absolutely absurd starts. You've described some that you've had, and there's multiple ways to get those. On the other side of the table, Lauren Nolan, he's playing, really a much more kind of a classic Magic deck, right? It's not doing anything broken, but it's not playing a single bad spell in the whole entire deck, right? I mean, there's no loopholes. The thing just does powerful stuff at every stage and has a solid sequenced game plan going for it. So right now he's trying to decide what to do with his 5th turn, and he's got great options. I mean, I see a Doomblade that he can use to take out Burning Tree Emissary and reduce the devotion down to basically nothing. He can also just play Obzedat if he wants, and Obzedat's awesome.
Yeah, Obzedat is a very, very
huge
powerful
pressure.
card.
And it's an interesting situation that he has there. I mean, Xenagos does a good job of keeping off the demon, but it can't keep off the demon and Obzedat. He put pressure back on his opponent. He's going to play Obzedat, and he's going to exile it on his end step so that he can bring it back in on his beginning of his upkeep.
All right, now this is Chris Fennell, one of my favorite Magic players around these days. And we're going to see what Chris can come up with on this turn, because Chris has a crazy amount of options available to him here. It's going to be interesting to see what he comes up with.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what he plays. I see that he's got a Garrick in his hand.
He has a Garruk, which he can cast. He has Nylia, God of the Hunt, which he can cast. And he has a Mizium Mortars in hand, which he actually can use in conjunction with the Nylia this turn. And Domri's ability to kill the Desecration Demon
is that
along with
right?
his Mizium Mortars. Yeah. So he's going to plus this Domri. So he's not on the Mizium Mortars line after plussing the Domri. It does not reveal a creature with a Domri. Now, will he go ahead and just slam a Garruk into play? Or can we expect him to have something else up his sleeve? Now, Nylia, God of the Hunt, is a little bit of a risky play here because his opponent does have the ability to turn that off if he so desires. Actually,
With
a little
Doomblade?
bit, a little bit surprising there. He could have actually left open a mana after casting the Nylia.
Now, has Xenagos done anything yet?
Xenagos has not done anything yet.
Okay.
But here we're going to see him make a Satyr with Xenagos, I would assume. Unless he's going for an ultimate on Xenagos.
No, I think he's going to make a 2/2 haste Satyr here.
Yeah.
And it looks like he can get in the red zone here, too, if it wants.
It's pretty risky to get in the red zone here because you want to force your opponent to need 2 removal spells to get in there with their Obsidat. Otherwise, the race situation is just going to get too bad for you.
So better just to protect your planeswalkers.
Exactly, because,
Okay.
I mean, you're going to need to you need to force your opponent to at least have 1 removal spell, because if you don't leave back your Burning Tree Emissary to block, then you're going to have to sacrifice your Satyr Hedonist, and then your other guy can get killed by a removal spell, and then you find yourself getting a Planeswalker assassinated by Obsidat, Ghost Council.
And that's not worth the risk. So here he is, Obsidat comes back in, is going to jump Lauren back up to 22. Chris is going to drop to 16. And Chris is hanging on here, but he's going to need to find something to kind of go over the top here as we see Lauren play an untapped Shockland. That's never good.
Oh, definitely not. And a Doomblade is going to be huge here. He's going to get to Doomblade this Burning Tree Emissary, which is going to turn off the Devotion.
So Nylia is now back to enchantment mode.
Yep.
Wow, and there's the second removal spell, which is going to do work to take down... Oh, man, are both of these Planeswalkers going to die here?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. What a blowout.
It's going to be pretty rough here.
And
this is game 3 here.
Chris Fennell, no untapped mana, just has no recourse but to say, okay, you killed 2 of my Planeswalkers.
And here we see again, like, this deck is extremely difficult to pilot. If Chris Fennell had used his Xenagos to make that 2/2 Satyr the turn he had cast it, this game could have been very different.
It's true. All right, here's Garrett, Caller of Beasts. He's going to plus him, reveal the top 5, and he's going to get any creatures revealed this way into his hand. Only 2. I believe that Lauren's asking if he can see the other ones. I don't know if you have to reveal those or not.
And now it does. Chris Fennell, not long for this world. Obsidat comes back, drops him down to 14 life here, ticks Nolan back up to 22, and he's going to be taking 12 damage
he's
here.
He's
going
dead.
Down to 2. Just
He's
dead
dead
to
on
that
Nolan's
Obsidat
next
coming
upkeep.
Back in.
Yeah. So things looking just awful here for Chris Fennell. It felt like he had a good board state going and was going to be able to mount some pretty sweet stuff, but a couple of removal spells later for Lauren Nolan meant that his huge creatures, I mean, remember, that's a 7/7 flyer and a 5/5 in black-white. So we're talking about some serious beef here, and they're able to take down 2 pretty leveled up Planeswalkers in one hit, and it's just been nothing but the worst here for Chris Fennell ever since.
Lauren with a really strong play there. It ends up becoming a moot point because of Pithing Needle, but he chooses to attack his opponent instead of the Garrick, putting his opponent at 2 when he's blinking an opposite out, and you can't expect your opponent to have any life gain spells and post-border games against you. So
yeah, that's going to do it.
Good.
Yep, Chris Fennell falls. Lauren Nolan improves to stay undefeated here at the Grand Prix in Louisville.
And
I wanted to
pretty
see
interesting game
Pelucranos there.
Yes, so did I.